Okay, first week of heavy hitters. Let's talk Melody. So, as you can see, I've actually got 3 decks I am working on, and overall, just a quick summary for anyone just interested to get it out of the way. Melody is definitely performing better with the assets of heavy hitters. Again, the simple fact that you now have attack actions that also further your larger goal of Final Act is fantastic. You can feel like you're actually doing something that progresses your main goal, which is building gold, building silver, to then pull off a Final Act combo, rather than having to just forfeit turns, not play aggressively at all, not force your opponent to block or get rid of cards from their hand, and just try to soak up damage until you can go for the combo. So altogether, Melody does feel a lot stronger. Personally, I have only won 1 game, and that was still mainly just luck combo based, right? We're still tweaking the deck, still working on it, but overall we are surviving significantly longer turns. And since we're surviving significantly longer turns, if we can figure out the correct ratio of lucky combo-ness to everything else, then the deck will perform all right? It won't be fantastic. It'll probably never be fantastic until we get, or if we get, actual barred cards that do also synergize, because that's probably the biggest thing at the moment. So Flesh and Blood isn't really going through power creep in a conventional sense, right? Cards aren't really being discredited. It's just that you have a lot more synergies, especially in-class synergies between cards. So having to pull predominantly from the generic pool is actually a sizable disadvantage compared to a normal hero, especially when our hero ability in itself is worthless, right? We're not playing songs, we're not giving our opponents any benefit, we're not using copper for Final Act because it is simply just too slow. Anyway, we'll take a look at the 3 versions of the deck. So test we'll start off with. So this is me trying to work around the main combo, as well as some flavorful additions thanks to Fish and Blood games. So Belittle and Minimalism, really, really valuable, right? It is a fantastic set of cards to run in Melody for a few reasons that Fish pointed out. So for starters, Belittle allows you to search out Minimalism, meaning that you turn whatever you're pitching into a 3, right? Because you can find blue minimalism, you can find yellow minimalism, so you're almost always gaining resources, right? If you're on the red, it would be neutral, but that's not a bad thing because you're still getting a card back in hand. But yeah, between running the blue and the yellow, as long as you can search it out, so as long as you have a attack action card with 3 or less base power, which thanks to Final Act, performance bonus, and even Belittle itself, that's easy enough to do. You can search out a minimalism, you can trade it's essentially whatever card again you pitch into Belittle. If it's a red, you can change it for a blue. If it's a yellow, you can float a resource, grab a yellow, and you're again equivalent to a blue. It's just a fantastic set of cards. Plus, it minuses from your deck. So this is really a hidden gem for Melody. Then we have, of course, performance bonus and test of strength. Test of strength is really diminished in this style of deck, right? It should really go. I do have, as you may have seen before, right, a wide and a big version. So big running Wage Gold, running Pummels, running all the big attacks I can, especially with Dominate to try and get gold off money where your mouth is, versus the wide, which is more in line with what Fish has been playing. You might have seen some of our mirror matches, right? So going for a more aggressive wide deck. So we've got Overload is my pick, but performance bonus, minimalism, Belittle, a Razor Reflex to synergize with Final Act, and Belittle plus the Go Again is fantastic. You can drop lead the charge. And there are a few other cards that he runs which are worth noting, like Fire Breathing, right? So the fact that you can sink resources into this makes it a solid combo into Final Act or after Final Act, or just Art of War, or just in general. And what else does he run that I haven't picked up quite yet? I think that's the big one. But overall, again, we are still tweaking, refining the decks, playing as much as I can, right? So a few games every day to see what works, what doesn't work. I do think overall, personally, and with my playstyle, I just want a more solid foundation for the combo. So for instance, I still just want a luckish base deck, right? Trying to go for the combo, trying to get a giant draw chain, but with enough pieces that allow me to extend or just make it a bit easier. So for instance, that's why we have this test deck. So my decks are still very much gimmicky, if you will, but you can make a solid Melody deck that is actually relatively aggressive, which is quite nice as well. It's just not what the playstyle I'm suited to, right? I like fun, basically, not super competitive, just trying to get the Final Act and wowing your opponents or wowing yourself. That's my deal. So Seduce Secrets is probably the interesting pick. So it is somewhat slow, it has a versatility that is quite nice. So for instance, it's instant, so you can just burn it. If it's in your opening hand and you just want to sink cards, so to thin out your deck and try to get the combo more consistently, you can just burn Seduce Secrets. You can also use it to opt your own deck, not just your opponent's deck. And then of course, if it's in the arsenal, it becomes a add one to your hand, which is fantastic for Melody, because cards in your hand are significantly better, again, because of the draw sequence and what you're trying to do, over having a card in your arsenal. Even if it's Final Act, even in which case I don't like putting Final Act, because Final Act is then susceptible to anything that breaks the combo. I will say, at the moment, the worst matchup is Brute, because of scaling Flesh Bag, because it can just completely shut down the combo. But other than that, Seduce Secrets, again, because of its versatility. Starting Stake is also an interesting one. It gives you the freedom to burn the Golder, to try and look for decks, to try and get something off that, again, puts forward at least some sort of aggressive strategy to try and get your opponent to thin out their hand and help you survive turns. So I do like Starting Stake. It is a bit slow, but it is yellow and a 3-block, so that sort of makes up for it. If you wanted to combo it with, say, Lead the Charge, you'd have to swap down to the red variety, which becomes a little worse in terms of going for the sequence. But I think overall this is probably the main backbone of the deck, minus the Test of Strength, unless I chuck in a few more sizable attacks, right? Because it's a decent block, but if you're always giving your opponent gold, then it's probably not worth the floor. We'd rather just a yellow or a blue card. So, okay, we'll look at the wide version a little bit more then. So for the wide deck, right, it is pretty identical to what I'm currently working on, with some slight tweaks. Wage Gold, because it's universal, it then becomes a target for Encore. I think overall, me and Fish agree though that blue is significantly better, because Encore then becomes pitch one, find a blue, which is fantastic. Again, you can float resource into your coins, be it silver or gold, and then also return a blue to hand. So that is definitely a much better utility use. So I'd probably change the red to 1 blue, even run the 2 blues potentially. Razor Reflex, again, it's now our combo extender for Final Act. So Final Act, we can either use Art of War or Razor Reflex. It's nice to have a few options to, again, guarantee that we can chain Final Acts together, because Melody just can't win with one Final Act, right? There is very little situations where one Final Act would ever be enough, and it is a lot of the times better, especially in a proper matchup where you're actually, again, not just trying to go for the combo, but actually put up a fight, to just dump small Final Acts. Even if they're 7, 9, it's still a sizable amount of damage. It's probably below average for most big decks, but it is still something you want to get in the habit of doing. So Razor Reflex then allows you to go into something else like Performance Bonus or Belittle, or again, vice versa. You can play them first and then go into Final Act. I do personally like Overload because of the Dominate. With Money Where Your Mouth Is, it's okay. Again, it's not fantastic because of the damage. You probably want to take the red just to try and guarantee that you do get the gold. Any gold token you can generate is fantastic. Even just 1 extra gold token goes a long way in making this deck a lot more solid, because it just has such wider use, right? You can pitch something into it. Again, if you don't have blue, if you have a blue, you can float a resource that then allows you to accommodate silver. If again, you badly draw, because one of the biggest issues I had personally with the combo variety of the deck is I would brick, right? Every time I'd go for the combo, it's not 50-50, it's a 2 and however many cards in my deck are left to draw Final Act, right? So there is a decent chance that I'd brick, and having, yellows having reds would lessen that. So the other big change I'd probably make is, instead of Tunic, I'd run, what's it called? Deep Blue, right? As another way to cycle a red or yellow card into a blue pitch, technically. So Deep Blue, and the other big thing, again, with being able to generate gold, you don't need to rely on cash out as much, wherever it is. There we are. So for instance, I can take Frontline Gauntlets for a bad opener against an opponent, right? If they're really just going to throw a bunch of damage at me in turn 1, I can sink my hand, I can sink Frontline Gauntlets if I have something in my hand I like. And then, yeah, probably Fairendale Spring Tunic for Deep Blue would be the other consistent pick. In terms of the head, I do like Balance of Justice, but it is definitely something to swap into depending on the matchup. The reason it's better than Crown Dominion is it's draw a card, so that's fantastic, and block. So you can block for the 2, so you have more defensive options as Melody, which you desperately want. And then, of course, it stays on field. You can either draw a card off of it, or you can still cash it out for silver. So it still has a pretty impactful use. You just have to sacrifice the gold token. And there are, again, other ways to generate gold tokens. You can just throw in a starting stake. But even the starting stake and a lot of the amulets, I think, are a bit too slow. Amulets are a bit better because you can take the amulets or talismans that have go again, and that still allows you to do other things. But yeah, it's nice. It's definitely matchup orientated though. Same with Ripple Away. Although Ripple Away, just because it's blue 3 block, probably include regardless. The 2 cost is not so great in this version of the deck. It's definitely better in the broader variety, the test, and the big version, because then it does work with Pummel as well, even if you just have to throw it out as an attack, right? Where is Pummel, right? 2 cost or more. So what are we running? Demolition Crew, pound for a pound. Dominate effects to try and get off money where your mouth is. Personally, I think I like this bigger deck a bit better. You still run into some issues on the cost basis, so I'd probably have to cut some of the red cards or some of the yellow cards and go for a bit more blues. Maybe even get rid of, like the Wage Gold, pound for a pound, and Demolition Crew, and just run some more blues so that you can try and, block with 1 or 2 cards and then go for pound for the pound, Demolition Crew, probably pound for a pound more, because it's much easier to achieve this effect for Dominate with money where your mouth is, to again try and get that gold with a Pummel to push it over the top. Although all 3 cards is pretty unachievable in Melody because of the cost basis and obviously how many cards you need in hand. But then you can also, try to go +1 with the draws. So there are ways, especially with a gold token. So for instance, gold token off of blue, you then float 1 resource. Art of War becomes a neutral draw. If it's in your arsenal, that becomes a bit more valuable. Cash in, if you have the token, then it's just a positive draw. Tome with floating resources could also be a positive draw. And there are just ways to try and get extra cards in here, and not enough to make the deck overly consistent, but it is definitely getting there, right? This is definitely a set in the right direction for Melody and improving the feel overall. It's still not really ever going to be a top tier deck or even a high tier deck, but I do feel like we're starting to approach the middle ground, which is quite nice. Anyway, those are my current thoughts towards Melody. As we continue to refine the deck, once I have a proper deck that I'm going to consistently play, we'll go over it a bit more in depth. But yeah, if you got any ideas, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, they'll do it. Right? Hope you enjoy. See ya.